Los Angeles Police Chief Michel Moore is facing backlash after his comments toward protesters during a short statement yesterday. Take a look.
Last night, just under 700 arrests. And within those 700 arrests were 70 individuals who were either burglarizing or looting, victimizing businesses further. So what that tells me is that two things. We didn't have protests last night. We had criminal acts. We didn't have people mourning the death of this man, George Floyd. We had people capitalizing. His death is on their hands, as much as it is those officers. And that is a strong statement. But I must say that this civil unrest that we're in the midst of, we must turn a corner from people who are involved in violence.
So that statement was incredibly stupid, okay? Because first off, he brags about how there were 700 arrests in one night, 70 of which were the looters, to which I say, you guys are doing it wrong. You're focusing on arresting the wrong people. But also, he followed that statement by saying, we didn't have protests last night. So according to his numbers, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. According to his numbers, 10% of people arrested were the looters. And what, the other 90% who were not looters, right, who were probably engaging in civil disobedience and got arrested because they didn't follow the stupid curfew rules. What, they're not protesters? What are they then? I mean, that was such an incredibly dumb statement. And then he follows it by claiming that these people are the ones responsible for what happened to George Floyd. I mean, it's like he walked it back later, which I'm still not buying at all. But still, like the way that the police department views peaceful protesters is the problem.
So all great points, Anna. Later, Garcetti asked him to go back up to say that he misspoke. Well,
and he did.
Say that you are about to make a strong statement. You know what you're saying. You're not misspeaking. You can say, hey, look, I shouldn't have said that. That's my bad. And I'm sorry. I didn't state it the right way. Okay. All right. Don't tell me you misspoke. We all saw it with our own eyes. You clearly meant to say that. And so I'm going to get to more serious points too, but I can't help but note that Eric Garcetti looks like Bane. So in that clip. And so it's the coolest he's ever looked. So I picture him putting his hand on the police chief saying, so you think you're in charge? You think the darkness is your ally? I was born in it.
Okay.
Anyway, hold on. I'm going to get to serious points in a second, but one more. The person doing sign language there, most emotive face I have ever seen in a person doing sign language. You should go rewind and check it out. Anyway, I enjoyed her performance. Okay, now I know it's a super serious story, and leave it to me to be slightly goofy in the middle of it, but let's go back to being serious because there's really important things in here. Look, guys, that's the LAPD, and you often hear about the abuses of the NYPD, and you're still hearing it in the middle of these protests. Wait a minute, LA and New York are two of the most progressive cities in the country, theoretically. So what's going on? Well, what's going on is that it really is the culture of policing in this country, everywhere. If it was just a few bad apples, you wouldn't have the Omaha police having these issues, let alone the New York police or the LA police. You'd imagine that LA and New York police would have very progressive policing, but we don't. Why? Because the culture of policing in this country is excessive force is good. It protects police. Protecting police is the most important thing there is. Protecting the rich is the second most important thing there is. But if you're a minority or you're poor, God help you, because showing overwhelming force, and as Trump would say, dominating the civilians is what they are taught as a matter of course, including in the most liberal places. So just own up to it. Even the Democratic Party does not acknowledge that. Garcetti defends his cops. Even de Blasio, when they ran over the protesters in New York, originally defended the cops. And so the police unions and the police culture is so strong in our politics. The Republicans aid and abet that 100%. But a lot of the Democratic officials, almost all the Democratic officials, certainly the Democratic establishment, but even progressives like de Blasio are still intimidated by the police unions and that culture.
So Eric Garcetti called him back up to the podium to clarify his statements. And I think he did a pretty crummy job because there was no clarification. He meant what he said. But judge for yourselves. Here's his walking back of the previous statement.
So I misspoke when I said his blood is on their hands, but certainly their actions do not serve the enormity of his loss and cannot be in his memory. Looting a store, burning a building, attacking a police officer, nearly killing one, but across this country, seeing the death and the destruction cannot bring honor. It's not done in an honorable way. The reforms, the justice that needs to be achieved, what his name should stand for is the catalyst for change. And I would ask everyone, every group, every organization, that as they bring voice to that needed change, that we join with you. And so I regret the remarks of that characterization, but I don't regret, and nor will I, apologize to those who are out there today committing violence, destroying lives and livelihoods, and creating this destruction.
Yeah, I want to say something here. Can you imagine if the police, in situations like this, targeted only the looters, and not just to protect the stores, but to also protect the protesters, so that the protesters could protest in peace and say, hey, you guys are besmirching what these protesters are doing, which is the most fundamental right we have in America, and we're not going to let you get away with it. So the people doing the looting are often doing it in an organized way and doing it to make money. And so they're using the protests in the most crass way to get their own personal objectives. Imagine if the cops said, we're not going to let you do that to the protesters. Instead, here in LA, again, one of the most liberal cities in the country, we have the cops bragging about how they arrested 70 looters, but 700 people overall, and that 90% of the people that they arrested were protesters. I don't see how that's the point of pride. Because at the end of the day, you know why cops don't like protesters? Because they think that they rule the streets. They're the biggest gang. And remember, we've covered this 1,000 times on the show. Biggest crime in America is disrespecting a police officer. It's not actually criminal, but they think it is. They think it's the worst thing you could possibly do. You will get your skull cracked so quick if you talk back to cops. So they think protests, are you saying I'm not in charge? I think they take it as a personal offense. So
yeah, of course they do. Of course they do. The protests are about them and they hate it. They hate it. Of course they do. Look, this is what I mostly want to say to cops who use this type of rhetoric or this type of narrative in responding to what's happening in the country right now. I don't think anyone is a fan of the looting. I'm not a fan of the looting. I live close to a community that was looted heavily yesterday, and it's a minority community. It was actually the first community that Trump targeted because of its undocumented immigrant, population. And all of the businesses there are small businesses that are owned by minorities. So watching that area of Los Angeles County look like a war zone yesterday was just disheartening and terrible. However, the best way to, deal with this situation isn't just to emphasize the looters and make these protesters out to be criminals and just conflate them with some of the actions that are taking place in these stores. The best way to do it is a little bit of self-reflection. Los Angeles County has had issues with policing for a long time, including right now with the latest police chief. His name is Alex Villanueva. And as soon as he was elected as, the sheriff, as soon as he was elected as the sheriff of Los Angeles, you know what he did? He reinstated cops who had been fired for excessive force, and in one case, a cop who had been fired because of domestic violence against a woman who's also part of the LAPD, right? And she had video evidence of him trying to break into her home. So he had been fired previously for stalking and domestic violence, and then Villanueva comes in and reinstates him. Why? Because he helped Villanueva in his election campaign. So that's the kind of cultural issue within the police department that needs to change, within the sheriff's department that needs to change. But instead of that self-reflection that's so desperately needed, why don't we go ahead and focus on the looters and conflate peaceful protests with those looters? It's the messaging is wrong, the culture is wrong, the mentality is wrong.
If you don't have Democratic politicians calling out this police training, the police culture, and their actions over and over again, then you're never going to get that reform. And they're never going to view us as the people that they are serving. They're only going to view the wealthy and the powerful as the people that they are serving. And it's not an accident that it developed that way. And by the way, you know where LA used to recruit their police officers from back in the day? Alabama. So they bring in people from Alabama to target minorities here in LA. That's why part of the reason why the LAPD was so notorious. And Daryl Gates, who used to run the LAPD, during the riots in the early 1990s, again, would not stop looters, but instead went to go crack the skulls of the protesters and put them in jail. Because the reason they don't focus on the looters as much is because it's a form of punishment. Hey, you don't like the way that we're doing policing? Why don't we let them rob you and burn places down and arrest you for protesting? So it's got a long history here in LA, as it does all across the country. If Democrats don't have the courage to speak out against it and demand change, we'll never get change.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.